Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Shaw. I'm the project manager for the Vicksburg District, the Corps of Engineers. Thank you for your attendance and for coming out for this public meeting. This is the fourth public meeting for the Pearl River Flood Risk Management Draft EIS presentation. We're very pleased that you could be here, and we will get going. I have a remote here, and it works, which is a wonderful thing. So I hope everybody can see. I hope everybody can hear. If I'm not speaking loud enough, please let me know, and I'll talk up. So this is the fourth in a series of 4 meetings. We started out yesterday in Jackson, Mississippi with 2 different meetings there in 2 different locales. We had a meeting this morning at 11 a.m. in Slidell, and this will be our finale, if you will, for this round of public meetings. I would like to make some introductions over here at the head table. We have Robin Colosimo. She is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Army for Project Planning and Policy Review. We have Mr. Eric Bush, who is the Director of Planning and Policy at Headquarters, United States Army Corps of Engineers. We have Colonel Jeremiah Gibson, who's the Vicksburg District Commander for the Vicksburg District Corps of Engineers. We have Keith Turner, who is with the Rankin-Hines Pearl River Flood Control and Drainage District as our representative for them. We have Troy Constance, which is right here behind me. I apologize. Troy is the chief of the Regional Planning and Environmental Division South. And Brandon Davis is in the back. Brandon is the planning liaison, and commonly known as RPS. That's Mr. Constance's organization. So at this time, I would like to recognize any government officials that we might have with us here with us tonight. I think Anna was here a few minutes ago. I'm not sure. There she is, I'm sorry. So we have Anna Timms with Senator Hyde Smith's office, and I'm not sure if Brad made it in. We expect Brad Ferguson with Senator Wicker's office as well. I want to express our appreciation to Mayor Michael Watts for her participation in making all this happen here. I'm not sure where the mayor is right this moment. Oh, there she is. I'm sorry. I think I saw you come in. I apologize. And so at this time, one of the things that if you followed these meetings much in the way at all, about a little over a year ago, in May of 2023, we had, if you will, a scoping meeting where we did a series of public meetings. And the current commander at that time was Colonel Chris Klein. Colonel Klein has basically moved on at a different mission, and we have our new commander, Colonel Gibson, and we've got a video that we would like to show everybody that basically talks about that transition. So.
I'm Christopher Klein. On the 7th of June, 2024, the Vicksburg District published a draft environmental impact study, a pivotal step in our journey towards mitigating the flood risks plaguing the Pearl River Basin. Publishing the Pearl River Basin DEIS marks a significant milestone in our collaborative efforts with the community and local leaders to deliver a flood risk management strategy tailored to the unique needs of the city of Jackson and its surrounding areas. We're committed to providing a solution that manages flood risk and at the same time enables a wide range of additional benefits. It was an honor to lead the team through the publication of this important document. My time in the Vicksburg District, however, has come to an end, as the Army's transitioned me to another role in a district serving our warfighters, allies, and partners in the Middle East. The good news, though, is that the Army chose a very capable leader to continue the good work in the district. I'd like to introduce Colonel Jeremiah Gibson. Colonel Gibson most recently served as deputy at the Mississippi Valley Division in Vicksburg and has been following the development of this plan for months. Colonel Gibson, Jeremiah, welcome.
Thank you, Chris Klein, and for your dedication and leadership. To our partners, I assure you that the mission entrusted us will continue with the same vigor and resolve. Together, we will navigate the complexities of the Pearl River Basin with diligence and foresight. For decades, flooding along the Pearl River has disrupted lives and livelihoods. Various proposals have been presented, yet none garnered definitive support. In July 2022, the Rankin-Hines Pearl River Flood and Drainage Control District presented a locally preferred plan to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, the Honorable Michael Connor. This set the stage for the Corps' involvement. Secretary Connor tasked us with bridging data gaps, identifying the National Economic Development Plan, and evaluating the merits of that plan. Through extensive public engagement, we've gained valuable insights ranging from the need for recreational areas, concerns about water quality, and existing concerns in the lower Pearl River. As we move forward, your engagement is critical. We invite you to attend our scheduled public meetings or submit your thoughts via email or mail. Your voices will shape the future of flood risk management in our region. In closing, I urge each of you to participate. Together, we can forge a resilient future for those who are affected by the Pearl River Basin and those who rely on its many benefits. Thank you.
Okay. Get our presentation right back up and be ready to go. Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've got a few more government officials we'd like to recognize. Senator Jason Barrett. Thank you, sir. Representative Becky Curry. Thank you, ma'am. Representative Ken Morgan. Thank you, sir. And Senator Andy Berry. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So we've got a presentation that we're going to provide for everybody. When we finish with that presentation, one of the things that we have is we've got a microphone set up. We most definitely want to hear from you, the public. Any questions or concerns that you might have. When we finish the presentation, we'll just ask that if you would come up to the microphone, state your name, please, and then express your concern. And so to make things kind of go in an orderly fashion, we've got a few rules of engagement, which you can see here. I would ask you please wait to be recognized. Speaking time so that everybody can have an opportunity to speak. We would like to have no more than 3 minutes, if you will, per question. And then please use respectful language. So if for some reason we can't get to all the questions, or if there's something that you'd be more comfortable putting in writing, there's multiple ways that can happen. You can do, there's a email address right there. There are comment cards when you first came in downstairs. Those comment cards, you can fill those out. And then you can also use the U.S. Postal Service and send in your concern that way as well. So why is this important? Well, everything that we're doing here is to satisfy the National Environmental Policy Act. NEPA is what you'll hear us talk about it, but it's to satisfy that. We have to document the process by which we go through, and the public input is very important. It's something that we need and we want to capture. So, All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Colosimo to talk about our purpose.
Just pick it up, hold it to your mouth. There you go. No switch, go ahead.
Hello. Oh, look at that. Thank you for the guidance. As Nathan said, I'm Robin Colosimo, and I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works in the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works Projects office. Now, what's that mean? It's a mouthful, but essentially it's a small office where the policy oversight of my boss, Mr. Connor, of the Corps Civil Works program occurs, right? So Mr. Connor is one of 6 Assistant Secretaries of the Army, and he is a Biden policy official. I am career, and my job is to help in that oversight. And I do that with my partner, Eric Bush, who's in the Corps of Engineers, and you'll hear more about that. It's really important that we're here today to hear from you. I want to thank all of you in advance for your time and your passion and sharing with us your thoughts on where we are in this important process. Hear from everybody. We want to make sure we get all those comments in, both verbally and written. So please, we know we value that. This process has been guided by the scoping meetings we had in May, work that's been done prior times and with Rankin-Hines and even by the Corps, but it's particularly guided by direction my boss gave to the Corps and how to move forward to try and come to a solution that we can address with implementing authorities that already exist. That's really important, right? There's a variety of authorities that we can leverage to resolve flooding. But it was also important to know that money was set aside to implement a project, if we can find an implementable project, to resolve these problems that start in Jackson with bipartisan infrastructure money that was set aside for Jackson to implement this project. What the work has happened to date since we did our scoping sessions. It encompasses really important updated modeling. It builds on these prior studies, including peer reviews that were completed by the Corps, Rankin-Hines, and others. And what you're going to hear today a bit more about is the outlining of alternatives that can be implemented within those current authorities. In all cases, it's imperative that any project we seek to implement dovetails with current investments going on with Jackson, but is responsive to legislation, including legislation that talks about any potential downstream impacts, right? I know those are front and center of mind here. It's equally important to know that we're aware of your concerns. I want to understand them better, but about water supply, reliable water supply, both for your businesses and your community. It's also true that I know that we're concerned about bank swapping and those kind of things. So we want to talk about what this project might mean for Jackson and how it may or may or not implicate any concerns in your community. So with that said, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
All right, Mr. Bush, are you here?
Thank you, Tom. First of all, thank you all for coming out tonight to take your time to share with us your views, your comments, your questions. That's a very important part of our process, as Tom has already stated. I'll introduce myself again. My name is Eric Bush. I'm the Chief of Planning and Policy for the Corps of Engineers at our headquarters. And one of my responsibilities is to provide technical and policy advice to my boss, the Chief of Engineers, Lieutenant General Scott Spellman, and also to the Secretary himself, Mr. Connor, through Ms. Colosimo. You all know, that we're part of a public process right now, but I just want to make a few points here to explain the importance of your participation in this process. From my perspective, this is the most important part of our decision process. We put a draft report out there now, and we need to hear your views and comments, and we'll take all of those comments into consideration as we move ahead to finalizing our environmental impact statement. And that will include additional evaluations that we decide to undertake as a result of comments we've received in these public meetings. Next slide, please. All right, so I'll just start with a very important point. In this project, although we're very aware of the concerns downstream of Jackson, but this project is about flood protection in the Jackson area. That's what it was authorized for. And so, when we talk about flood protection in the Corps of Engineers, we use terms like flood damage reduction and flood risk reduction. But what it really is about is reducing human suffering. Because if you think about the impacts of floods on people's jobs, livelihoods, properties, their homes, those are devastating events that we have a mission in the Corps of Engineers to try to help with and ameliorate those conditions. Through our process, we evaluate a range of alternative plans, and you're going to hear about the alternatives that we've evaluated tonight, and be given an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. It's also important for me to point out that we do this in partnership. We have a non-federal partner for this project, the Rankin Hines Flood Control District, represented here tonight by Mr. Turner. And I'll also add that they've already done a great amount of technical work, some of which we are still utilizing in our decision process. Another important point is that the project is already authorized by Congress. Now that's a very important action that has already occurred in our process here. And so that implementing the project that was authorized by Congress is subject to determinations that Mr. Connor is going to make as a result of completing this environmental impact statement. I'll also add here that the administration and Congress have set aside funds to initiate design and construction activities for a flood protection project in Jackson after our required evaluations have been completed. And finally, as Robin pointed out, per very explicit direction we received from Mr. Connor himself, we are preparing an environmental impact statement to inform you, the public, and also the agencies that have a role in implementing this civil works project. We are in the middle of that public process right now, that public comment period. That initiated in June, it completes on August 6th. So we're right in the middle of that public comment period right now. And so I want to thank you all again for allowing me to be here and for you all coming out tonight to share your comments and questions. And we'll be happy to take your questions. I'll try to answer those questions at the conclusion of the briefing. Now I'll turn the presentation over to Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. I'm going to give a little background. Some of you are probably familiar with as far as what we're dealing with in Jackson and what the Pearl River is about. As many of you are aware, of course, Jackson has had flooding since its origination. And as Jackson grew, the flooding became more and more difficult to the point of where in the 1960s, the Corps came in and constructed levees, which I'll mention a little bit later. But it's flooded regularly. In 1979, I believe you all had a significant flood here as well in 79. We had our flood of record where Interstate 55 was underwater, downtown was underwater, the wastewater treatment plant went underwater and put raw sewage coming down to y'all and folks below you for almost a year. Since that time, of course, there's been other floods, 82, 83, and then more recently, as 2020 and 2022, we had floods. The 2020 flood was actually the third flood of record and would have been dramatically worse, but for the fact that the Ross Barnett Reservoir was extremely low. It was lowered to a purpose of trying to kill invasive plant species, so it had some flood storage capacity that it wouldn't normally hold. And that ended up helping a lot, even though it was still a record flood at the time. So we've been dealing with flooding as everyone has, and we've been trying to find solutions for many years. As I mentioned, in the 60s, the Corps came in and constructed levees. They also channelized the river. They took the area right across from downtown and built about a 3-mile straight channel, and then they also dredged out above and below that. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, in 79, we still had a significant flood, and that was overtopped. As you can see from this picture, that is the top of that picture is the levee being overtopped. That's right there, that's Herringborough Chevrolet, some of you all know that area, and that bottom is Interstate 55. Just north of that is where it went underwater. Next slide, please. So since that time, since 79, other state agencies were trying to find solutions. Ultimately, in the early 2000s, Rankin Hines Flood Control got involved to help find solutions because prior efforts, some of you may be familiar with what was called Chaco Dry Dam, which is a dry dam north of the reservoir, 60,000 plus acre design, but it was shot down by locals who were concerned that they were going to flood. And then later, a levee plan was proposed that went from the reservoir south below downtown, which was also shot down by folks downstream through the legislative process. So there hasn't been a solution in all these years, and we're still trying to find one. Ultimately, a project evolved over the years to this, what you folks call One Lake. And the Rankin Hines folks entered into what they call Section 211 agreement with the Corps of Engineers to allow us to prepare the environmental impact statement and look at alternatives and feasibility study. We began that in 12-13, finished a draft EIS in 2018, which we conducted public commenting process for that. Some of you may have been attending those meetings. And then we submitted it to the Corps of Engineers in 2022. That is where they took off and started their work. As you'll hear tonight, what the results of their efforts have been in collaboration with Rankin Hines. Next slide, please. One of the things that we also deal with in Jackson is we have a lot of tributaries that have flash flooding, particularly on the Jackson side of the river with the slope of these creeks. They flash regularly, and so we're also working on projects locally within the county and the city, but they're trying to work out tributary issues. I know it's less of a concern to y'all, but it's part of the issue that folks have to look at when we're talking about flooding in the Jackson area. So there's several projects throughout the metropolitan area that are being worked on, millions of dollars trying to fix the flash flooding projects as well. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this project is outlined in Water Resources Development Act 2007, Order 3104, and prior authorizations, which basically, as has been stated here, finding flood control, flood risk management for the metropolitan Jackson area. That is the focus. Rankin Hines Authority also is within that range. And now, of course, as you'll hear coming up, that goes beyond just the metropolitan area when you're looking at alternatives, but that is the purpose of need. And it comes from the fact that north of the Ross Barnett Reservoir, that water basin, of course, when it floods, it comes down through the reservoir and it comes into the metropolitan Jackson area. It's not a flood control reservoir. They have to let water out. And it comes into an area that is confined, more constrained because of development and other reasons, and it causes flooding throughout the Jackson area. The flood plain is not as wide as it would otherwise be. As I mentioned, we have both interstates. We have Lakeland Drive, which can flood. We have 4 hospitals in Flowood, which are threatened by these floods. We have thousands of homes and businesses, downtown Jackson, south of Jackson, are all vulnerable to flooding. And a lot of these homes and businesses, on an annual basis, have to pack up their stuff and get ready to move at a regular because of the frequent flooding. In addition, these homes in the north and south of downtown Jackson side, many of those are environmental justice communities, meaning they're minority or low income, and they flood first. They're the first ones to flood. And these homes, they get water creeping up the street. They have to decide when they see those rain coming whether or not they have to pack up and leave, whether it's going to actually flood their homes or not. And that becomes a real challenge. In addition, a lot of these communities have over 50% rental property, so it's not easy to find solutions that can work that also account for those dynamics associated with that. Next slide. All right, thank you, sir. So at this time, I'm going to talk about the USACE activities, things that are ongoing right now. So it was mentioned that the Corps of Engineers works under authorization, and Section 3104 is the actual authorization for us. And it basically stated that the Secretary is authorized to construct the NED, which is the National Economic Development Plan, the LPP, which is the Locally Preferred Plan, or some combination thereof. Some combination thereof is an important concept because as we go through the presentation, you will hear it mentioned as CTO. And what that really means is that we look at different features between those alternates, and we are able to pick those that either have reduced impacts or lower cost or greater benefits. So the the challenge there that the Secretary put on the Corps of Engineers was, number one, to identify that National Economic Development Plan, to compare the levels of flood protection for the various alternates, and then assess the environmental acceptability and technical feasibility of those alternates. So one of the things that we would like to communicate to you is the study area is the area that is Congress authorized us to look at. And so that constitutes Rankin and Hinds counties, the cities of Jackson, Flowood, Pearl, and Richland. You can see there's numerous tributaries that are included in that area. And so that's represented by, there is a yellow circle that is shown graphically here, and that represents the study area. That's what I just described. The other area is what's known as the project area. And the project area is the area that we're actually going to be working, if you will, working the project. And that begins at the Ross Barnett Reservoir and goes just south of Byron. And so, and this would be limited to the area where the proposed actions would be implemented. And the last thing I would mention is there is this trapezoid, or this kind of a green rectangle there, that is representing an area by which, when the project, if implemented, would be effective from a hydrological standpoint. So, I failed to mention one other thing. As Mr. Turner mentioned earlier, there was a slide that showed local work that was being done by others with respect to the tributaries. From the hydrology and the hydraulics standpoint, our modelers utilize the actual rain on the grid that would fall within those tributaries. That has to be considered when you're performing the models for the study area. And so we've been working with those folks that are undertaking the work in the tribs, and we're trying to account for that in every way. So the alternatives that are actually under evaluation, there's broken into two parts here. One is the work that was done by the non-federal interest, Rankin Hinds, is a part of that 2022 report. And that includes three alternates: alternate A, which is a non-structural selection; alternate B, which was the levees plan that was proposed back in 2007; and then the alternate C, which was the locally preferred plan. And so the first two were basically removed from consideration for a number of reasons. The last one, the locally preferred plan, includes a significant amount of channel improvement, and then a weir, a new weir, for the purposes of water supply and to create the lake, if you will. And then it also had a levee plan where some levees were added, and I'll show you those in just a minute. And then so, since the Secretary's direction, we worked closely and collaborated with the Rankin Hinds team, and we've basically come up with a modified non-structural plan, which we call A1. We've got, I mentioned the combination thereof plans earlier. That's an alternate D, which is the combination that we'll speak of in just a minute, but it includes a weir. And then alternate E, which is basically the same as alternate D, but there is no weir included. Okay, and so the details with respect to alternate A1. The evaluation is done in the 25-year floodplain, and any structures identified within that 25-year floodplain, actions would need to be taken there as a part of that alternate. And so if the structures, if the properties themselves are residential, the thing that would happen is that they would have to be elevated. If they're within that identified area of that 25-year floodplain, they would have to be elevated. And to ensure that they're taken out of the floodplain, they're actually elevated to the 100-year level. So that's the level of protection they would actually receive. If they're non-structural, then they would undergo dry floodproofing to protect them. And one other possibility there is voluntary property acquisition. And the thing that's pretty important about that is if there is that acquisition, then any places that are acquired then become green spaces. They're no longer allowed to have residents there or whatever. And so the results of that 25-year floodplain identified 143 structures total that are within that floodplain. Of those, you can see that 81 were residences, and then the balance was non-residential. So the H&H model, as I mentioned earlier, did include the rainfall on the trips as well as on the Pearl River. The locally preferred plan, that was one of the alternates considered. That's the one that was originally developed by the Rankin-Hines team. A couple important things there would include a non-structural plan. It includes I mentioned the clearing and the lowering of the overbanks, the channel overbanks, to improve conveyance when you get that 100-year event. We're not doing anything in the channel itself, it's on the overbanks. And so with the idea being that helps you at the 100-year flood, because basically we've improved the ability of water to move downstream. It also included the demolition of the existing water supply weir at the fuel water treatment plant, and included the construction of a brand new weir. This weir would have been constructed at elevation 258, and then would include the upgrading of an existing federal levee at the Savannah Street wastewater treatment plant. And then it would have also required, because of the permanent pool that would have been created there, would have required some updates to interior drainage systems. All right, back to the CTO. Okay, so the combination thereof, I mentioned we had two options, or two alternates, if you will, D and E. And so both have common features, and we'll go into those next. Okay, so they both have improved conveyances through that overbank, the removal of some of the overbank materials, very similar to alternate C. One of the key features that is different between it and C, alternate D and alternate C, is the addition or the relocation of that weir. That weir is now moved upstream to just south of the I-20 bridge, I believe. It's because we're moving that weir up, then it has a reduced amount of excavation in comparison to alternate C. And in also moving that weir upstream, if you will, we avoid some known HTRW sites, and we ultimately should reduce the amount of mitigation required significantly. The weir elevation that we, in comparison to alternate C, the weir is now at 256 instead of elevation 258, so that's 2 feet lower. The other thing that is similar to alternate C is that this weir contains a low flow gate, which in periods of drought, they can open that gate up to ensure that water can continue to flow downstream. And it also includes a fish ladder, so that in species such as the sturgeon or whatever have the ability to move up and down that weir. They would not be prohibited. I failed to mention one thing there. Alternate D, based on the current information we've got, is the likely potential national economic development plan. Alternate E is basically the same as D, except it does not have that weir, and therefore would not require, It's no different than the run of the river now, other than it would still have the excavation of the overbanks, but it wouldn't change the way the channel runs in terms of low flow and for the aquatic species. So this is one of the things that I would really like to focus in on for a moment. So what you're actually looking at, this is it's a water surface elevation. And these lines will represent the water surface elevation. On this side, it represents the upstream, if you will. This side over here represents downstream with respect to the river. So we always compare any of our alternates against the without project. In other words, the condition as it currently is. The without project is this kind of blue line that runs right here. The with project is this line right here. I point this out for one reason here in particular. That 5 feet is 5 feet of reduction between the without project or current condition and with the project in place. That is basically the location of the weir with respect to upstream going downstream is about that point right there. A point of reference there was the Gallatin Street landfill. Richland Creek is here. And then you'll notice there is a slight bit of what we would call inducement there. And the inducement there is about 6 inches with the, I think, plus or minus 3 inches with respect to the accuracy of the model. And so the hydrological impacts, if you will, resolve about 5 miles north of Monticello here. Our H&H modeling, that's what they show, that there really will not be any discernible impacts once you get south of that point or downriver. We also recognize that there's something that needs to happen that we will not, we haven't done yet. That's the sedimentation modeling, and that will occur in the next phase. Okay, at this time I'm going to ask Brandon to come up. He's going to start talking the environmental side.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the hospitality and giving me a tour around this place a little bit earlier. Beautiful place you have here. And to our public officials and first responders, thank you for your service and being here tonight. It's after 6 o'clock on a Thursday, it's supper time, so we appreciate you being here and your commitment helping us make this a better project. I'm Brandon Davis. I'm your planning lead out of the Vicksburg District. Tonight, these next few slides, we're going to talk about the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, what I'll call it. I'm going to go through that. But I want to set the table on a couple of things. We as the Corps of Engineers, we are a risk-informed, decision-making organization. That's the type of planning that we do. What that means is we're going to take the best information that we have available at the time. We're going to tag and put risk on that, and we're going to continue to come back and visit to see are we doing what we need to be doing? Do we need to do something more along those lines? And that's really what it's about, taking the best information we have at the time, identifying and putting a risk with it, and then moving forward. That's what we've done so far with the CIS. This is a draft. This is not a final. There are still some areas that need some improvement, and that's the reason we're here tonight, because we're relying on you guys to help us make this a better product. Another commitment that I have to you is that doing my best to answer your questions. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not the best person to answer all these technical questions. I'm not that smart, but I do have subject matter experts in the room and downstairs that can help you with anything that you may have on the environmental side, economics, HCRW. So that's my commitment to you. I don't want you leaving here with questions. Things may come up as you move along, and that's why we have this open comment period for you to get with us to help us. Again, we're relying on you in this process to help make it better. Again, one of the good things about the NEPA process is that it's a method of holding the federal government accountable, checks and balances, okay? And one of the requirements that we do with the NEPA process is allowing the public to comment and being involved in these type of exercises, which again is a benefit to us all, because we're relying on you to help us make it better, and that's why we're here tonight. So I want to go into the habitat mitigation, and then we're going to roll into a few more things. First thing on the habitat mitigation here is that what you're going to see is that we are not, we have alternative C and the CTO with alternative D and E. You're not going to see the non-structural alternative A1 up there because we are assuming there's not going to be any, not expected to have any reasonably foreseeable environmental impacts with those alternatives. So you're not going to see that on this slide here. But what you are seeing here for the alternative C and the CTO, we're going to look at the acres that are impacted here, and then we're going to talk about the AAHUs, and we'll go into detail what that is. So if we look at alternative C, the river widening project, the locally preferred plan, you can see the various types of habitats here: open water, bottomland, hardwood, swamp, and you can see what the acres impacted are. You compare that to the what we're calling the CTO, alternative D and alternative E. You can see the reduction through each of the different habitat types. Trying to make sure I've got my notes correct on this. So also, the second thing here that we're looking at here, we're looking at the AAHUs, okay? AAHU is an average annual habitat unit, and that represents the functions and the values of a particular habitat. So when we mitigate for land and projects in the Corps of Engineers, it's not going to be, we're going to look at the functions that are lost, and it's not going to be a one-to-one acres that we look at. For an example, Tupelo Swamp, the value of Tupelo Swamp being, damaged or taken away, probably more than likely is going to hold more value than open land. So we have to look at that, and we have to figure what the impacts are, and that's one of the ways that we go through the mitigation process. Our terrestrial impacts were determined by running a certified habitat evaluation process model, HEP. This was completed by the non-federal interest contractor. They did a great job on that, and it has been presented in the EIS. And also I wanted to point out to you that our team is currently working on a mitigation plan, and that'll be completed prior to any construction activities. The reason that's not completed is, again, it's part of the process. This is a draft. We need input from you. We also need direction from the Secretary's office on what route are we going to go so we can make the final adjustments to that. So this next slide here, threatened and endangered species slide. In the table, you're going to see there are 8 species of concern in the study area. It should be noted again, like we talked about on the mitigation slide, alternative A1 is not present here. We're not expecting any reasonably foreseeable impacts to threatened or endangered species with this alternative. Our team has worked really close and collaborated with our sister agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, to making the determinations that we have here. We're going to talk about those determinations right now. But I wanted to point that out. This wasn't something that our people just decided that what the determination is going to be. We have had collaboration with other federal agencies while we're doing this. So for example here, we'll look at the Gulf sturgeon in alternative C. You see LAA, and then you come down on the northern elongated back and you see NLAA. So what does that mean? The LAA is likely to adversely affect, but not likely to jeopardize the continuing existence of. And whereas the NLAA is not likely to adversely affect. Now what you're going to know is that the impacts for alternative C and the alternative of the CTO are the same. And the reason behind that is like, it's assumed that like alternative C, the construction of the CTO and weir could likely eliminate some riverine habitat. We are very familiar with that and we understand that. A velocity analysis has been conducted for alternative C. It's being conducted to better understand the potential impact of the CTO on the riverine system. Very important that we understand how would that impact Gulf sturgeon and other types of species that could be impacted. Alternative E, the CTO without the weir, the impacts are slightly different, but you can see there are some impacts that we need to talk about. One I want to point out here would be for the ring sawback turtle and for the pearl map turtle. We're showing LAA on those, potential for an impact. And the reason being is that even though there is not a weir there, there's still going to require some excavation to the banks, and those turtles have been known to rely on those banks. So there could be potential impacts to those species. A biological assessment was prepared and has been submitted to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for these determinations on that. So that consultation is ongoing, and the is anticipated to be completed by the release of the final EIS. But again, also it goes back to understanding the path forward with this exercise. So cultural resources, you're going to notice that all the alternatives have some type of potential impact to cultural resources. Cultural resources are everywhere around you, and it's a very broad array of things. Like this building that we're sitting in tonight, beautiful building, is a cultural resource. So there's a lot that we have to look at. It could be graves, it could be potential historical findings, buildings like this. There's a lot that we have to look at on cultural resources. But our team has done a fantastic job. Our subject matter experts are some of the best in the Corps of Engineers. We're currently negotiating a programmatic agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office, tribal nations, and other stakeholders we have as well. So what is a PA? What is a PA? Periodic agreement, a programmatic agreement, I'm sorry, thinking of something else. But a programmatic agreement is a plan that we lay out the steps needed to take to address any type of impact. So if we know that we're going to be working in an area that has a lot of cultural resources, what are the steps that we have to take to either avoid or mitigate for that? Again, our team is having regular consultation meetings. They actually had one yesterday. They're close to reaching agreement. And that PA is expected to be signed before the record of decision is signed on the draft EIS. So the next slide, we're going to talk about tribal nations. The same falls underneath the NEPA umbrella. This is part of the Section 106 requirements that we have with cultural resources. It's a policy of the federal government to consult with our federally recognized tribal nations and governments. And that is what we've done. Currently, there are no tribal lands or rights that have been identified, but we're continuing to have consultation with these groups in case there's some type of identified protected tribal resource that we need to work through the process on. So environmental justice, this is a very important topic. It's one that the Obama and Biden administration has done a fantastic job of making sure is being identified, and that these groups of individuals aren't forgotten about. So what is environmental justice? For those that don't know, it's really the means of just treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of their income, backgrounds, race, origins, disabilities, things of that nature. Everyone needs to be involved. It's not that we as the Corps or our non-federal interests, we find cheap land where low-income housing may be, and we go and we take that and then we develop a project on that. That's not how things are operated. Everyone's involved and make sure that everyone has a voice. As you can see from the no action alternative here on the slide, in the 100-year floodplain, there are less than 800 structures and that are in EJ areas of concern. The actual number is 773. In the non-structural Alt A1 plan, there are 143 structures that make up EJ concerns. And then one thing I want to point out, and that I've told all the other groups that I feel like is an elephant in the room, is this bullet right here about structure inducements occurring from the Alt C and the CTO. As you can see on the CTO, it's showing 52 structures. That's not 52 new structures that are getting wet. These are 52 structures that are already getting wet as a result of the existing conditions right now. So what does that mean? It means that depending on the alternative that is selected, either way, those 52 structures are going to have some type of a non-structural measure, either being raised with elevation or floodproofing of some things of that nature. So just wanted to point that out. That I probably should have reworded that, made that a little clearer. Just want to let you know that is not 52 new structures, it's 52 that already exist. But again, we'll have to follow the proper procedures on non-structural means, depending on whatever alternative is selected by the Secretary's office. And the final thing I want to relay on the environmental justice slide is that our comment period, I'm sorry about that, our comment period stops or ends for this, I believe 6 August for the NEPA side, but the environmental justice and outreach will continue. We have 2 or 3 meetings that are set throughout the next coming months to meet with environmental communities and individuals that may be affected by this. We want to be able to grant them the opportunity beyond just these meetings here to ask any questions that they may have about the project. So the next slide here is on recreation. I want to point out that this is not a recreation project. The Corps of Engineers does not have the authority to justify a project off of recreation. The way our regulations read is that 50% or more of the benefits of a project has to come from a mission, in this case being flood risk management. So once you have 50% or more of your benefits from that mission, then you can tack on any recreation on the side. For this project, and you'll see in a moment, there's roughly $5 million worth of recreational benefits associated with this project and that come from boating, fishing, sightseeing. The team used unit day values and updated that to come up with those numbers. But I felt it's important to lay that out. But also it's important to talk about some of the so what's behind this as well. So you notice that the what has benefits, the no action and alternative A. Obviously, the no action will have no added benefits. Alternative A, the one we've talked about being the non-structural plan, wouldn't expect to see any type of benefits on recreation, but you obviously would have on alternative C and then the CTO. So, but you know, that's water-based recreation, shoreline-based recreation, things of that nature. But what you also see on the truth of the matter is, for C and the CTO, you are seeing potential impacts at LaFleur State Park. Now, the area that is of question of potential impacts are areas that are already flooding and inaccessible. And I don't mean to sound caustic when I say that, but it's just a point out of where the land is. It's nothing what we can tell is affected by walking trails or anything of that nature. It's more of a swampland. But still, though, with that being said, we've continued to work with, depending on the alternative that's selected, we would continue to work with the Park Service if we were to see any damages on that and mitigate the way we needed to mitigate that. Mitigation could be additional walking trails, things of that nature. I don't quite know what that would be, but the bottom line is if it's something that's being some type of an impact on the recreation of LaFleur Bluff, because I know that's very important to a lot of our citizens up in the Jackson area, and maybe you as well if you travel up there. But it's not just something that we're just going to let it flood and walk away, that there's going to be something done about that. So the goal obviously is, regardless of what alternative we have with recreation, alternative with environmental, you want to minimize any impacts, but we'll obviously have to mitigate if absolutely necessary on that. So the economics is one that it's a lot of numbers up here, and this slide is a summary. The next slide is a lot of numbers, and I want to be as clear as I can to avoid any confusion on this. So I'm going to go through this for a second and try to make this as elementary as possible. I'm not talking down to you, just trying to lay it out in a way that's easier to understand because it's not obvious most of the time. So what you're going to notice on the cost here, and we're just going to focus on alternative B with the weird, it's the first one that I'm looking at. You see the project cost ranges from $487 million to $655 million. You may be asking yourself, well, why is there such a gap there? Well, we had to add some type of a risk to that, and because again, risk-informed decision making, and that's what we did. Our engineers worked together to come up with what they thought the numbers might be, what the values might be. One way that we also are checking ourselves through checks and balances is these numbers are currently going through an agency technical review process. Independent eyes are looking at that. The individual that actually is reviewing that is from the Corps of Engineers Economic Cost Center of Expertise out of Walla Walla, Washington. That is their job. That is their expertise, is handling cost engineering. And he's a very tough reviewer that's worked for me in the past on some projects. He's he's independent, but they're looking at these numbers to see if anything needs to be added, taken away, etc. So our charge from the Secretary's office was to analyze an array of alternatives and to determine an NED plan and help the Secretary make an informed decision with the information that we have. Do we have all the information that we need? Well, we think we do, but we do know that what we have we're vertically aligned with. But if there's more that we need to add or more that we need to look at, well, then again, that's what we're going to do. So I just wanted to point that out. But when you're trying to determine what an NED plan is, there are a couple of things that you look at up on the front side. One is you're trying to determine what's going to give you the most benefits, the most bang for your buck. And then you're also going to look at what the benefit to cost ratio is. You want that to be above unity or above 1. So, an example right here, we want to maximize our net benefits. It's going to be a little more obvious on the next slide what I mean by maximizing your benefits. But the benefit to cost ratio, breaking this down for you, what that 1.4 right there, that 1.1 means is that, so I'm going to take what my benefits are that's derived by my economists and engineers. I'm going to divide that by the cost of the project that's given to us by the engineers, and we're going to come up with a number, simple arithmetic, but it comes up, in this case here, 1.4. So what that means in simplified terms is that for every $1 that's invested by the federal government, in theory, $1.40 should be returned to the public. And you can see how it breaks out 1.1, 2.1, so you can kind of get the idea of what that means. So again, a lot of numbers here. So I wanted to break that down to make sure that I was clear with what all this means. So you have your alternatives here, you have alternative D, the alternative E, and your non-structural alternatives. And you're going to notice we do have the low and the high costs. Again, that's going through review right now to see where we're at and if we need to make any adjustments on that. Again, the big difference on alternative D and alternative E are going to be if you look at the benefits here. So for example, on alternative D, you're looking at 27.7 in benefits versus compared to 22.4. That's the $5 million in the recreation benefits that I was talking about by having the weir in place of adding for various boating and camping and things of that nature as well. So that's one of the differences that you see there. But getting back to the NED plan, in addition to, well, let me go ahead and say this first. So I'm looking at my annualized net benefits here, and I see 8.2, 6.8, I believe that's what that number is, but you get what I'm talking about. So when you compare the 1.4 to that, you actually have multiple projects that could be considered an NED plan based on determination of the cost. So in this case here, alternative D could be the NED plan, the alternative E, CTO.weir could be an NED plan if you look at that number. And then also your non-structural plan could also be part of your NED plan. So again, following the guidance that was given to us from the Secretary's office, providing an array of alternatives to be looked at and determined what is going to be selected. But you also have to look at, in addition to the NED, you look at the implementability or ability to implement. Sorry for the big words, I'm tongue-tied. So are you able to, with this project, either one of these projects, even though it could be considered an NED plan, are you able to implement it? So that's other things that have to be taken into factor. Also with the non-structural, are you going to have a participation rate for the non-structural to take place? In some places, and what you're seeing about a 50% participation rate on the non-structural. Some people, they're not going to want to be involved. So that's factors, and we don't know what that actual number would be for this project, but that's to give you an idea. Other things have to be considered when you're trying to determine that. So finally, the last slide here, and I know this is something that is near and dear to some of you in the room, and I appreciate that as well, is the hazardous, toxic, and radiological waste as part of this project. The non-federal sponsor's done a great job of going through various phases and tests. But once we know what the alternative select is going to be, then there's possibility that more analysis will have to be done. Part of our regulation is that the Corps of Engineers cannot build on a site that has some type of an HCRW concern. It has to be either excavated out and cleaned or avoided and minimized. So you can't have an issue where you're going to have some type of sewer seepage or creosote or something along those lines that's going to impact the water or water supply. So that's something that has to be taken into account and will be once we know the path forward if we need to do more analysis. David Gaze in the back of the room is subject matter expert in the Corps for HCRW. So if you have additional questions on that, I'd be glad to talk with you about that. Again, though, I appreciate your time. On behalf of me and my chief, Troy Constance, we thank you for allowing us to be here tonight to present this information to you. And, again, the questions, we're looking forward to that, but our subject matter experts are downstairs for the board. So as you walk out, if you have something that's really on your mind, we hope that you'll stop and visit with us. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. So that concludes the presentation portion of our meeting tonight. So we're now going to enter in a time where the public, we want your feedback. You've heard us say that. If you would, please come up to the microphone. I would remind you of a couple things. Please limit your questions to about 3 minutes to allow anybody else and everybody to make a comment. If some of your questions are very of a very technical nature, very detailed, as Brandon mentioned earlier, we do have subject matter experts that are here. When you came in, there were a bunch of study boards down there. Those boards are where the subject matter experts will actually be. So if you have some very technical questions, there are opportunities to talk with those subject matter experts. We're video recording the public meeting. We have a transcriptionist who's actually doing court transcription, making transcripts, if you will. We want your comments either through the comment card, the project website with the email address, or by physical mail. So at this time, I want to go over where we're at with respect to the review period and our timeline today. So as you've heard, the document, the draft EIS, environmental impact statement, went out for public review on 7 June. We will conclude the comment review period on the 6th of August. Next in line would be the addressing of those comments. And so that's timed for August and September, and scheduled for a notice of availability will be in October, with a target for a final EIS in December, and then the Secretary can take the action of his determination and a regular decision. So at that time, or at this time, I would just ask if you would like to offer your questions and comments, please do so. I would ask, keep in mind the 3 minutes, because we want to see if everybody can have an opportunity to speak. Okay, and I failed to mention one thing. You can go ahead and come to the mic. There's a QR code down in the lower right-hand corner, which will take you to the project website, where you will see the videos from our public meetings. There will be project updates, the draft EIS, multiple things will be out there on that project website. So that's your easiest way to stay up to date on what's going on in the project. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you all for coming. My name is Cynthia Stewart. Our family has been in the area and farmed the same farm since the 1800s. Just a question, and y'all's slides are great, but I couldn't read some of them, so if I'm asking a question that was on one of the slides, I apologize. So how long is construction on C and CTO expected to take? And will during construction or after raise or lower the Pearl River levels? Or is that a technical question?
So that's going to vary depending on final design. But normally when we look at this, we'll look at a period of about 5 years of implementation. To answer your question, is it going to raise or lower? It's designed not to change the water surface elevations or any other thing downstream. It's lowering the water surface elevations above the weir in the area of Jackson.
During construction too?
During construction, we intend to have no impacts, and so we have methods in which we manage that. Part of the contractor's requirements to have those in place. It's rather complicated. We have to get some of the construction guys in here, but we can consider flood events during construction, and part of the contracts that we write, they have to have measures to address that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, sir. I'm Ken Morgan, state representative going on 19 years in the House of Representatives. And I served on the committee, Conservation Water Resources, and chairman of the Forestry Committee. I've lived in Marion County, Mississippi all my life. I'm going on 73 years old. All these settlements that's up and down the river, they ain't coming down on mule and wagon, they come up the river. John Ford home down in South Marion County, Columbia, Mississippi, Monticello, Mississippi, all the way to Jackson. They had paddle wheelers coming up and down the river because they could. Me saying I was going on 73, I can remember back about 62 years ago, I was standing on the bluff of the river and looked down, and in October when I was squirrel hunting, and I could see the fish swimming. Them days is gone, been gone. Along with some of the problems that's what happened in Hines County. Hines County has a failing system as far as their sewage system. And they know it's failing, but they hadn't made any attempt to re-energize it to build new facilities for them. Then it had the water problems. We all know that because it was on the news. Well, we kind of got shuffled in the mix that the people down south in Hines County get the brunt of the storm. And, you know, when they built the state capitol, the old capitol and the state capitol now today, which is built on the property where the old First Penitentiary was all up the hill from High Street. They didn't go down in the floodplain and build facilities down there. Why? Because they knew it flooded. But when you get population moving in and all, you get realtors involved, and they say, well, we can buy that land for a unique price. Because that was cotton and cornfields all around North Barnett Reservoir when it was built. And the property owners that owned the property at that time couldn't go down and put any kind of structure down there, or couldn't build a little boat ramp or anything to fish, or because the reservoir board had authority saying they couldn't do it. But then once the real estate people got involved in it, that $300 acre land and everything else went up immensely. And it's pretty much controlled. Now, I've asked several times, do y'all have a daily operating procedure manual for Ross Barnett Reservoir? You didn't know what I was talking about. The way that thing operates has been operating on the telephone. What y'all done to the water this morning? I went down there, my boat's 3 foot below the mark from where I pull in, and that kind of thing. But what we really wind up hurting is people down South Mississippi. From Hines County, our river has just went hot. We can't straighten it out, I promise you. I know from my heart that it's probably 50 to 75 yards wider than what it used to be. And you can't come from the Gulf Coast where this is also going to affect some of the seafood industry down there if this happens. And water gets pulled out, evaporation every day. Nobody don't know how much that's going to take. But what was going on last year with the drought situation, we should have learned something from it. But with that said, if we don't do something to right now to start trying to correct some of the problems we had, because you can't get a 14-foot boat with a 25-horse motor and leave down at Gulfport, Mississippi, and come up the Pearl River and make it to Jackson without getting out to that boat. Because you've got so little water to run through. If you don't have a jet fuel or something on there, you're not going to make it. And I wasn't going to ask a bunch of questions. I just want to give you a little history of what's going on. And y'all chew on that when you want to. The thing about it, it's happening, folks. And it's not all just what's going on in Jackson at the reservoir. We got 10 large timber companies that's coming out and cutting 300 and 400 acre tracts of timber. And the timber industry has changed. If you don't have a big skidder and all, wet area and all, garbage out, you're not gonna get them to the mill. That's common sense. But if that skidder goes through a bubbling spring, it's been there since God created the earth, and packs it in about 3 or 4 trips through there, it quits floating. But when it rains, the sediment goes down to the first head of the spring or yard. Then it pushes it down to the creek, and then it pushes it to the river. And they tried some jerrycans years ago down in Blueberry County, Louisiana line. Picked all that stuff up and set it on the bank, and guess what? The river come up and washed it all right back in there. So I don't know what the answer is, but I'm not sitting here doing nothing, taking blame for something that Hines County and Rankin County is what to make money off of on the real estate venture. Because once you put a levee in there, the first thing you're gonna cover, oh, you're protected by the levee, now the price of that property just went up. And that's just common sense to you that. Because I got some property at Lake Chotar in Warren County too, and I deal with the levee over there. But with all that it said, the headwaters in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the Pearl River starts, hadn't changed. It stayed the same. This is all. Because if you want to see what the Pearl River used to look like 62 years ago, you go up to Philadelphia and put the river, start down a little bit. Because those folks could paddle those 6-foot barge down up the river and run trot lines and all fishing because the flow of the river was moving so slow it was like a dead lake. Now you take a 10-foot aluminum boat, get there and paddle half a mile. You want to borrow ice cream before you get there. Appreciate your time. If you got any questions, we'll quit.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I truly thank you all for being here. I know you did a special favor. Was not on your normal routine. I thank you for giving us this time. And as you can see, there is a lot of interest. But we all know that this project began many years ago with the sole purpose of being a recreational housing development. After several tries and fails, it went quiet for a while until the Rankin-Hines County came together to call it a flood control project, enabling them to tap into federal funds. If this were truly a flood control project for the good of Jackson neighborhoods experiencing flooding from their many tributaries, it would make sense that this would be the first thing addressed and corrected in their neighborhoods, and then work down to the lake area. The idea of creating a lake and then working up to neighborhoods to try to solve their issues is completely backwards. The entire idea of the One Lake Plan is nothing but a scheme to get into the back door with federal monies in order to fund their development for the wealthy. No river is exclusive to any one group, city, or state. Rivers belong to everyone, every community surrounding them. The only one having ultimate purview over natural lakes and rivers is the God that put them there. For one selfish group to discount every person, every community, everything downstream is wrong on every level. For one group to decide the fate of those in the 100 miles below the project is unconscionable. Spending these years wasting their time, energy, and money by trying to call this development a flood control project, as a taxpayer is infuriating. This time, money, and effort would have been better spent by actually helping the neighborhoods in Jackson by dredging their channels, reconfiguring their drainage systems, and putting this money spent into real drainage and flood control issues. Our communities downstream will not survive without the quality of life that the Pearl offers. We have to have water levels acceptable for the 100 permitted users downstream of the project area. Downstreamers are completely against any further alteration of our river and completely against any project upstream that does not directly benefit downstream. If you're going to approve this project, what are you going to do for us? In the DEIS, it is stated that you will not have cost estimates for mitigation and habitat loss until the project design has been approved. There is not a plan for the hazardous waste sites, accepting what you just said, until after it has been approved. How can you possibly consider approval until you have the plans that address those issues? On page 11, item D of the commander's report, it speaks to public testimony. and comments from communities south of the project area demonstrated in numerous existing problems on the Lower Pearl. Public testimony included also observations of extended periods of flooding and extended periods of low water, sandbars forming in the river threatening tributary access, low water flows impacting the Louisiana wildlife management areas, and low water flows enabling saltwater intrusion into fishing grounds and oyster beds. Since the deauthorization of the Pearl River as a federal navigation project, the maintenance of waterway falls within funding available as authorized by the caretaker status. It goes on to say that we should have a comprehensive watershed study of the Pearl to fully understand the basins, hydrology, hydrodynamics, and ecosystem. It also says that we should have improved monitoring to provide for additional information to better understand how various sections of the Pearl River perform during flood events. Additional instrumentation is desired at specific river miles. So, to you, Court, do you recognize that there is much to learn about potential effects of the Lower Pearl, regardless of which alternative is selected? Doesn't it make more sense to wait until we are able to obtain authorization and funding for you to have these studies completed prior to sealing our fate? As I said in the beginning, this is all backwards. You're not putting first things first. It's like asking forgiveness rather than permission. There are too many unknowns still outstanding, both for the flood victims in Jackson and the downstream below. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Representative Becky Curry. I have District 92, which has Kyle, Lawrence, and Lincoln. And I just want to say that I represent 25,000 people, and I've not talked to one person that is for this project. The A1, I believe it is, where you go in, there's 81 houses that could be put on stilts or made where they could survive a flood. It worked on the coast, and it sure wouldn't cost what you're asking to spend of taxpayers' money. And I think you can double that $600 million because there's no way that you can finish this project with that. I know that there's a bridge in it that's going to be over $250 million that I know of that can be added to that. It really ticked me off that you're talking about recreation when, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, from the board. I can't see that far without my glasses, but you're working very hard with the Army Corps, but you only are concerned about a couple of counties, Rankin and Hines. Your only concern is their recreation. And you know, probably the worst thing the legislature ever did was give you the ability to tax people up there. I'd like to know how much money your board has brought in by taxes. You have that number? Well, could you give me a roundabout number?
It's about $1 million.
About, you make, so how many years has that gone on?
It's formed in the 60s, and of that dollar, most of those are spent on maintenance and pump stations.
So you spend $1 million a year.
Reserve repairs and average.
So my question is, y'all are making money to tend to your problems, but everybody's only concerned with Rankin and Hines. And I need to tell you, I don't want anybody's house to flood. Don't want anybody's house to flood, but we can't worry about 143 buildings when you are looking at destroying from Hines County to the Gulf Coast in Louisiana. So if you don't have a viable product that you know is going to work, you can tell us, you're going to be fine. Jackson, you're not going to flood anymore. Everything is great. We can assure you of this. But you don't have that. So who loses their job? What's the accountability for the Army Corps of Engineers when it goes bust and it's the wrong thing? Who loses their job? Because I lose mine when something goes wrong. I get voted out by these people. But nobody loses their job. There's not any accountability. And let me assure you that Louisiana and Mississippi will sue you. We will be in court fighting over you destroying our recreation, our way of life, our wildlife, our fishing and hunting and recreation. We will be in court. And I just want to say to you, please think about more than Rankin and Hinds County.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm not a politician, and I'm not going to stand up here and wax no eloquent speech. But I do have a couple of facts to point out. The city of Jackson pumped over 4 million gallons of raw sewage in the Pearl River last year. How about that? Every bit of sewage from McGee, Mendenhall, D-Love, Georgetown, Pino, Harrisville comes through Monticello either by the Strong River or the Pearl River. Why would anybody want to do anything to flow down the water rate coming past our town? And the last thing I got, the Pearl River covers at a moderate level 33,000 acres of land. If my figures are correct, and I'm not an educated person, but if my figures are correct, that's 1 billion and 400,000 square feet of land. Have we given any thought to making the reservoir 2 foot deeper? And how many cubic feet of water would it hold if we did that? It's just some thoughts. Thank you.
So, yes, sir.
I didn't know if you were going to respond. I'm sorry. My name is Andy Berry. I'm here in a couple of different capacities tonight. I'm Executive Director of Mississippi Cattlemen's Association, which I want to talk about first. I'm also a state senator for District 35, which is Copiah County, Lawrence, Simpson, and Jeff Davis, which is the Pearl River from the Hinds County line, both sides, south of here for a couple of miles. In my capacity as in working for the Cattlemen's Association, I deal with cattle farmers and farmers and landowners across the state. And that includes both sides of the reservoir and the proposed recreation area we're talking about here up north along the river. I never, not once, have I heard anyone north of Lakeland Drive talk about the problems they have with the Pearl River. Anywhere south of the Pearl River, it is very routine to hear after a rain or some type of water event, the quickness of how that river rises and falls and the deterioration of their banks and the loss of their land. And I heard a while ago the last speaker talk about possible mitigation of walking trails at the Flores Bluff State Park, and we have people losing acreage, not a damn trail, acreage, because of how this is managed. In my capacity as a state senator, just this past session, we authorized and funded gauges for the lower Pearl River. Why in heaven's name will you not wait until we have those gauges installed and more data to study? I don't understand that. When has the last comprehensive study been done for the lower Pearl? When is the last study of the lower Pearl been done?
I don't have that information, sir.
And you're sitting here talking about billions of dollars for another structure, and you haven't studied the river, and you're not going to wait until we get these gauges in to see what's going to happen. I have sympathy for these people up in Hinds County. I don't want anyone flooded. I don't even want to go through any type of disaster. I truly don't. But this is people's livelihoods, their heritage, and we're losing it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And we will we will get the information. Like I said, that will be, part of the public record. So as you come back to the public website, you'll start seeing the comments and the responses coming in on there. So.
My name is Carrie Smith. I'm from Louisiana, so I feel I have a vested interest in Louisiana as far as the Pearl River is concerned. We skied in that river. Well, you can't do that now, especially if y'all go through with this. And I live here in Monticello. And in response to your statement, my opinion, it's all about money. Y'all are losing money, and that's why you're rushing it. You haven't done the studies that you need to do, and you can't give us the facts. So it comes down to how much money has these contractors and whoever else is in charge lost and will lose. People here will lose their livelihood and they'll lose their homes. And that's just not right, so somebody can have a walking trail. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Next. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Jason Barrett, Senator for District 39. And I know it was said multiple times throughout this that this deals with congressional study that was authorized by Congress for the Hinds County, Rankin County area. And to echo a lot of sentiments that have been given here, have any studies been done outside of what you referred to as a trapezoid or the rectangle that you put up on a slide?
So the hydrologic model that we did went way down the river. What we're showing you, now I'll go through this again. The study area is what's in the authorization. The project area, it varies from alternative to alternative, but it's where you physically work. And then the influence area is where you could potentially have influences. So we modeled the river and tracked it through our model until we saw no further impacts. And that's why you see the box kind of stop right there. If you could pull the profile. So this is what we look at, just one of the pieces of metal that we look at. So what you're seeing is that point is where the weir is. That's the lowerings within Jackson. And then we know that we're transferring water down. And so when you start transferring water down, you start looking for those influences. And if there's a problem, we put that into our project. And what we were seeing is about 6 inches change close to the weir, and then it starts to tail off pretty quick. Down here, it's inches, and then when we get about 5 miles north of here, it's imperceptible in the model. So what you need to understand is that those models there's a relative tolerance in which it can predict about 6 inches. So when we see 6 inches, we say that's real. And again, it's plus or minus, so it could be 6 inches, it could be a foot, it could be 0, right? Sure. And so we bring that into that, and that's why you hear us talking about that. We also looked at the velocities and things, and so we're not seeing huge changes very far away from the weir. Now, that said, before we actually go into construction, we continuously intensify our efforts to track that. And if we find things do change, we are required to report up that we have changes, and in some cases that will require a change. Sometimes directed by the chief, other times directed by Congress.
Well, at that point, wouldn't it be too late? Once you've began one of the options that you put forth today, you spent millions of dollars, and if there's changes, wouldn't it be too late to go back and change the plan?
Well, what I'm talking about is if we see changes in design, that we would have to report that out, and that may stop construction at all, completely. We have really good models right now, some of the best models I've worked with. I've been doing this for 39 years. And they did a really good job on this, and they chased it for miles and miles and miles from this point.
Yeah, well, as a senator that represents 56,000 people in Southwest Mississippi, and I can certainly appreciate y'all being here, but if you're here for comments, I think you need to know that the overwhelming comment is that people south of Rankin and Hines County, they are not wanting any changes to their river. And the disconcerting thing is, it certainly appears like, as someone who has a vested interest on the Pearl River in Manila, it certainly feels like someone's land in Hines County or Rankin County is worth more than land that we have worked for or our families have worked for. And to see year after year after year, and this young lady, Ms. Calasamo, mentioned sloughing earlier. I didn't hear anything about that today, but we are losing tens of acres every year based upon the rising and lowering of a lake that we have no control over. And now we're being told that this is a project that the Secretary is going to decide on in December. We're here for public comments, but we're not going to wait until the studies are back that Senator Berry was just referring to, because we're going to make a decision in December. I can tell you, it's very frustrating as citizens of Southwest Mississippi, and I think since you guys are having a public comment time, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you know that at this point, we do not support this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
And I'm also from Louisiana, so you can't tell me about well. That's about the lowest you can get right there. Y'all have a dam up here at Drac. I don't know who's controlling it. But they let that dam fill up to the top before they ever do it. When they open the gates, we get it. When we get it, Pearl River right now, you can't hardly navigate it because of all the trees and stuff. If you want to spend some money from the Gulf Coast, clear it out Pearl River. And then you won't have to worry about putting another dam in.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I've got a lot of questions, but y'all don't have time to answer them, so I'm just gonna make a statement. There was an older man in here a while ago, but he never leave out. I've listened to him and another older gentleman from Rockport talk about the Pearl River. Before the reservoir, he's got pictures, it was level, and the steamboat coming up at Rockport. Well, then they said, oh, the reservoir's not going to change it that much. Go to my place at Rockport right now. Like, you can't get to the river unless you're going to fall down a 40-foot flood. I mean, it's like the man said. Every time the reservoir was supposed to have been good for Jackson, and it's been dang good for Jackson. It's brought him in a lot of money. And I feel like one of those models you were showing a while ago is going to be the One Lake project that they've been trying to push on us, but y'all calling it CTO or whatever. Y'all calling it by a different name. And we're not going to have any kind, I think we should have to vote on it. Because nobody's giving us a chance down here. I mean, yeah, I feel sorry for people who gets flooded, but I feel about as sorry for them as they feel for us down here. I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm Mayor Justin McKenzie, and I'm from Columbia, Mississippi. I don't have a well-written statement like Miss Martha did. She was prepared to go through that spiel, but I want to echo everything she said. And everything that I've heard these people say so far has been in line with the same sentiments that I have and that I've heard from people in our community. I represent about 6,800 people in the city of Columbia, and I think, based on some of the folks that I see here from Marion County, I can kind of speak for some of them as well. I grew up on the river. At 4 years old, I was driving a boat up and down the river, down in Marion County, going with my grandfather fishing. We ran trot lines in the morning, we ran them in the evening. Okay? I can talk about all these mushy little things all day long. But I can tell you that the experiences that I had with him are memories that I have today because of an opportunity I had then. He died before I graduated high school. You know, I don't have time to make memories with him today. But those memories were made back on that river way back when. And I hope to never, ever forget them. I understand that the flooding is an issue up there. In the slide earlier, we were less than 200 homes would be elevated. I believe it was 170 something could be potentially impacted and elevated. In the 2020 flood, our town received significant damage. I'm still dealing with MEMA and FEMA to obtain all of our reimbursement for money that was spent then. Why did we receive significant damage? Most of the homes did not. I had a very minimal amount of homes that were damaged. But I had Highway 98 working as a levee down there. It was restricting the water flow. The level was almost 5 foot higher on the north side of Highway 98 than it was the south side of 98. I also, in this presentation today, and I do want to say thank you to the Corps of Engineers and staff members for being here and coming to hear from us on a local level. But I do want to circle back to the flooding that took place, and what was stated earlier really rubbed me wrong. We were lucky that the Ross Barnett was down to kill some daggum weeds.
Amen.
We were lucky the Ross Barnett was down trying to kill weeds. The damn thing ought to be dropped anyway. I don't care about anybody's boat dock north of that levee. If they need to adjust it to a floating dock, then they need to adjust to that. But what I feel, and the sentiments from every coffee shop you go to in Columbia, Mississippi, is that when they get good and ready, they dump it on you, and when they're ready to shut it off, they don't mind killing the faucet. And they will drop that water so darn fast that the river sloughs in. We had 102 acres down here in southern Lawrence County that my dad owned. My uncle's back here. He owns some 200 to 300 acres right now on the Pearl River, on River Road. Convenient name, eh? River Road, run along the Pearl River. It's a historic roadway. Has a historic landmark located on it. It floods every time we deal with massive rainfall in Jackson, Mississippi. But every time that it's flooded, the gates on the reservoir are wide open, dumping the water down here. Now, if it was dropped to restrict or to allow us more of the water that's already flowing down the river and should proceed on, we would have higher levels down here. At the same time, they would have a larger capacity to then obtain and hold water till the rainfall stops, hopefully. I mean, we're not looking for a 40-day, 40-night flood as experienced back in Noah's time. But in any normal event, we would expect that the rainfall would stop before the capacity would be reached, and they would have to start dumping. Therefore, the initial flash flooding could drain off, and then the river could be turned loose from the Barnett Reservoir to give them some relief. I think that's reasonable management. I don't know who manages it. I kind of got humored a while ago when it was said by Representative Morgan that it was managed by the phone. You know, it doesn't matter to me who's up there watching. I think the Army Corps of Engineers, one of your staff members, should be managing that reservoir. That's what I think. And I say that because then I think you take a vice person out of the picture, or a vice board of directors out of the picture, so that you're not dealing with folks keeping it at the boathouse level. It's disappointing to see that we would even entertain spending some $600 and something million to $1 billion to construct an area, to construct a 1,700 or more acre lake in an area that's going to affect 170 something homes. Why don't we look at going in, just like y'all said earlier, in the flood zone in the low-lying areas of the river? When the river jumps up and gets out of its banks, why are we widening the bank, maybe in that area, dredging it and widening it? That's a solution to start helping that. Let's dredge it and let's widen it a little bit. And then we take the overspill area and let's remove some of that dirt. Let's excavate it, let's haul it off, let's use it. Let's use it to build up the area for the lagoon in Jackson, or the sewer site. I mean, I've got to operate two lift stations, or two sewer lagoons in Columbia, Mississippi. I do not want them to flood and spill over into the river, because the folks in Bogalusa don't deserve that, and I should be humiliated if it does. I don't think the folks in Jackson that operate the local sewer and water have the same standards that I do. But I would be humiliated if the folks south of us received that off of us. I don't want to receive it from Monticello. So I would encourage, if Mayor Watts was having an issue with that and it spilling over into her lagoon, her to find a way to invest to ante up on her lagoon so that it would be suitable to hold the capacity and prevent from water spilling over in it and washing raw sewage down toward me. I think that the money could be better spent widening, removing some of the landscape next to the river along the lines. You don't want to dredge it like Representative Morgan said. I've heard, my granddaddy grew up on the river, my dad and all them, I've heard the stories of when they dredged it and they set all the trees up here, and then they dredged out some sand and stuff and just piled it up, and immediately it washed back into the river. We don't want to experience that again. That'd be a waste of money, time, and effort. But I do think that there's some responsible ways to do it without creating a wear or dam in Jackson to create an additional resort-style place. I mean, 49% of that money, I guess, can be spent on that recreation because we will exceed the 50%. I don't want any of my tax revenue spent on recreation of the lake in Jackson. That's just, I'm trying to speak for all of Columbia and Marion County, and I think I'm in line with everything that I would hear sitting around the coffee pot today. What I heard 6 months ago, what I heard 4 years ago when we signed a resolution. But the entire Board of Aldermen for the City of Columbia unanimously voted in a resolution to oppose the One Lake project, and we still stand by it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir?
My name is Mark Herbert. I'm a local resident here and a fisherman on the river. I have more technical questions than anything. We started out with the One Lake project and very big economic impact up there. And so our question becomes weirs. What level is the current weir in Jackson? 251. So we're going to have one project that says 256 and one says 258.
258 is the locally preferred plan.
So that's going to put you a 7-foot lake. Is that correct? It's going to put your water level 7 foot higher than what we are now.
For alternate C, yes, sir.
So you have one of these projects that doesn't have a weir.
Correct.
So does that mean there's not going to be a lake in that project?
There would be no difference.
What you mean there would be no difference?
In the current project. In other words, the conditions as they are today. That's right. Alternate E would be the same as the current project in terms of the elevation of the river.
So we'll leave the weir at 251.
Yeah.
Not going to do away with the weir at all. It's just going to be at 251.
That weir that's there is for water supply.
Right.
For the city of Jackson. Yes, sir.
So will you dig a lake without a weir?
All right, so what you have going on is two major components of the plan. So the way that you can move water quicker, there's two things that really slow the water down. You have the roughness of the channel itself, which could be anything in the channel, trees, grass, and all that stuff. And then there's the size of the channel. So you can widen the channel, and that helps convey water. You can remove some of the roughness, and that helps convey water. In this case, it's doing both. So they're widening the channel, which gives you more capacity, and removing the material so it gets a little bit better roughness. That's E. D is, you said, the same project, but they put a weir in there to contain water.
And make an economic development levy.
Well, the Corps of Engineers are not in that business, so.
Well, we did an economic development study, did we not?
No, that's not the kind of economics we do. What we're looking at is damages reduced.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a wholly different kind of analysis. Ours is what kind of damages are occurring in that area, and then what is the cost of removing those damages, right? And when you talk about unity, you want the number of damages that you remove to be higher than the investment that you put in. That's our economic evaluation.
So explain to me the difference between putting the weir, leaving the weir at 251 versus a 256 versus 258 makes a difference in flood control.
So what makes a difference in flood control is widening of the channel.
Okay, that has nothing to do with the weir then.
That's right, and we point that out. There is no difference in water conveyance between E and D. The difference comes in when you put the weir in place, then you start to accrue additional benefits, and those come in the form of recreation. So we look at all of the economic benefit that is associated with any plan we have.
So then E would keep the river exactly the way we have it now. Would not bother us.
Not quite exactly. It would perform pretty much the same under flood conditions.
Whereas we put a weir up there, then we change some dynamics with things low flow, evaporation rates in the August, and that's why you have added a low flow gate.
The low flow gate.
So now you've gone from the weir, now you've gone to a discharge, not a true weir, but a discharge.
Right. So the weir is designed to overflow. The low flow is to manage conditions when, like as you're saying, you get too low a river, you need to continue to convey water downstream.
So if we have an E, we don't have very much change here, whereas the other, we're depending on a low flow gate and somebody in charge of it, not us.
You will need to manage the water.
You get this right here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
My name is Steve Rollins. I own property behind Almost grocery store. Y'all can't control the dam up there or where you got up there now because water comes up so high, so fast, and it goes down so fast. What it does is when you thinking big shots up there is going to lower your water about 2 inches, y'all will close that dam up and it juts the banks off. Just, I've lost probably anywhere from 15 to 50 acres of land. And I've lost trees that big around in the river. And how y'all going to control that with another weir? That's stupid. I disagree with y'all and all the way. And you can't control the water now. How you going to control 2 of them or 3 of them? Ain't no way. And I don't want to lose more land. I lost enough. Y'all try to control it. Don't worry about them people up there in that lake losing the water going down that far. Let it drop down like the guy said. Get float piers. Help us down here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Alton Letchworth, and I'm a product of the Match Second Unit from Vicksburg and the Corps of Engineers. I spent 30 years on the Match Second Unit. Colonel, I know you got a job ahead of you. I dealt with flood control, dikes, and the preventative operation is the largest hired labor unit within the Corps of Engineers. And I retired from the Corps off the Match Second Unit as chief of the second unit when I retired. So I'm well aware of weirs, dams, locks, and what they do. All the tributaries that flow into the Pearl River and that have been properly managed over the last 40 years they wouldn't be flooded in some of those areas. They don't keep them cleaned out, so when you don't keep those tributaries cleaned out, the water is not going to flow like it should. If they were opened up, those tributaries would flow into the Pearl River, and some of those back areas would not flood because of that. That's simple math. It's not hard to figure out. And my question is, the dredging that you're going to do on the Pearl River, what are you going to do with the discharge of that dredge?
If you pull the map up there, the material they excavated from the channel can be placed in solid.
That's hazardous material.
No, sir, we wouldn't touch it. The Corps of Engineers has a policy that we won't take.
Jackson has been dumping sewage into the river up there for the last 40 years.
I understand this, sir.
So it's hazardous material.
And we do the radioactive HDRW testing. This gentleman right here, day to day, if you want to talk to him about how we'll handle that. But I promise you, we don't construct on sites that have HDRW. It has to be a clean site before we go in.
Well, that's your opinion. Our opinion down here is they dump all sewage in the Pearl River every day it goes by.
Yes.
That's not going to, none of this is going to solve that problem. Those 81 homes that you had up there, that's going to be done. Those 81 homes, you could pay them $250,000 for every one of those homes, and you spent less than $40 million.
And I think you nailed the project cost.
So you could buy every home out that's in the flood area, and you would use half the money that you're going to spend on this.
So one of the things that we look at is that we look at the damages reduced. So if you look at the non-structural plan, it only has 143 structures in it. And so one of the things we do is how effective is the action. And so when you compare the damages that do exist, we show there were 773 structures in the 100-year floodplain, all of them experiencing some sort of flooding. To justify raising, because of the cost that you're talking about, you can only get to about 143. But when you start looking at the structural plans, and the various structural plans, you start incorporating a whole lot more structures for damages reduced. So those become more effective in resolving the problem. So we don't just look at the benefit cost ratio and the net benefits. There are other criteria we need to look at. And again, of course, we talk about that as well. One of them is indeed acceptability, and that is how well it would be accepted by the communities, by our partners in it, how well it is cast against existing policies, rules, laws, and regulations.
And we're, now you can put a boat in below the reservoir. If you put that weir in there, you won't be able to go over that weir to go below the I-20 bridge.
I'm sorry, I'm not following. Say it again.
You can, if you put a boat in the river below the reservoir, between the reservoir and the I-20 bridge, when you put that weir in there, you're not going to be able to come below the I-20 bridge. You're going to be confined to that one area.
Yes, sir. I believe that would be correct.
So, if they develop that area there and people put houses and whatever else, one theory is they're going to cut channels in there and build houses back up in there on those channels. Well, the only boating area that they'll be able to draw in is from the I-20 bridge up to behind the reservoir. So, and none of this benefits Lawrence County. We get no benefit out of this. And if the reservoir had never been built, we wouldn't be standing here addressing this area today.
Amen.
The reservoir was built on the idea of flood control
Amen.
and recreation. But they took the flood control off of it after it got built. They used that flood control statement for money to build it. That's what they used, how they used it. So it was false pretense in the very beginning of when they built it. And we've suffered from that ever since it was built. You can go up, like you said earlier, you can go up to Pearl River, north of the reservoir, and it's a beautiful sight. If you fly a helicopter from there down here, you'll see banks left in by the river here in the summertime. You have to get out of your boat and pull it up the river. And it's all because of the reservoir and flood control. So my 30 years with the Corps of Engineers on the Mississippi River, I'm well aware of weirs, underwater weirs, Victoria Bend, the project that's up there. What it does, it does what it's supposed to do. It opens it, makes it, keeps them having to dredge. But when it leaves there, it's deposited somewhere else. So I'm well aware of how it works and what it does. And in my opinion, in my 30 years with the Corps of Engineers, this is a disaster for Lawrence County. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm Scott McLeod. I've lived here my entire life. I was raised up on the river. That man runs up from Mike Center, for me and him played in that river. We fished in that river together. That's beside the point on this right here, what I'm going to tell you. I've worked in that paper mill right there 44 and a half years. What's this going to do to my paper mill? Huh? Come on. I didn't tell you. That mill, I run a paper machine. And I use a lot of water. Reckon where that water comes from?
75 million gallons a day.
Oh, you know something? He knows. 75 million gallons. You build this, and we can't get the water. And Thurman, tell me if I'm wrong, but it has to be a certain temperature, correct? So here we are. And let me tell you something. You shut that paper mill down, Mike Santa, if you're a supervisor, you and Mr. Glenn, what's that paper mill do for our county? Couldn't survive without it. You talking about a lawsuit. You talking about some mad folks. Yes, sir. Think about it, people. Think about it. That's all I ask.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Can I ask one question?
Yes, ma'am.
So you said that a secretary somewhere is going to make the decision?
It's the Assistant Secretary for the Army for Civil Works, Mr. Connor.
Okay, so why isn't he listening to all of this?
I hate having so close. My name's Robin Colosimo, and he's my boss. And so I'm here representing him directly as his highest career civil servant. So he came for the original listening sessions in 2023. We are helping inform him through this process. And so the reason he makes that decision is because Congress directed that. That's when we talk about Congress decided there was a project here of work. We have to determine through this process collectively to include this public input if there is something that is implementable with authorities that has support, and that decision goes to him to make that.
Well, I hope you let him know that he's talking about from Jackson, Mississippi to the Mississippi Gulf Coast to Louisiana. We're not talking about two counties. I cannot say that enough, that we are desperate for him to have heard us. And I sure wish he had taken the time to be here to listen.
Sure, I assure you, ma'am, that he is listening, and I know Mayor Watts even met with him not long ago, so he is very aware of this issue, and I will continue to translate all the things I've heard here. Thank you.
Real short. In 1980, I was elected president of Pearl River Land Conservation Association, And we did get the legislature back then to give us a 24-inch fall in 24 hours. And it helped with the sloping of the bluffs, believe it or not. But we've gotten away from that over the years. One question I'm gonna ask y'all, and I appreciate y'all coming in because I know this is your job, you gotta do it. But have y'all flown from Jackson down to the coast to see what the Pearl River looks like? You need to get them to do that, that'd be money well spent. Thank you.
Just one alibi. I was not in the meeting that happened in the Pentagon. I was actually with our second political, the principal deputy, Mr. Pinkham. I believe if that's correct, Ms. Wilson.
Okay. Thank you. Next. Yes, sir.
I'm Andrew Whitehurst. I've asked questions at 2 meetings so far, but when I'm the water, what am I? So tired. I'm the water program director at Healthy Gulf, the Gulf Restoration Network. And when this document came out, I looked for an economics appendix. And the next day I called Eric Williams, the guy up there, was able to talk to him, asked him, where's the economics appendix? There's a statement in the main report that says, see economics section, and there's not an economics section, and there's not an economics appendix. And I've got an economist who's going to charge me $200 an hour to review it if I could find the economics appendix. So before the end of the comment period, will there be any economics appendix released on this? There was one of these in the 2018 document that the Drainage District put out. It had charts and graphs, and it had the assumptions that were used to all of the things from your guidances and your engineering notebooks was in there. You could follow it, we could see the work, and that's not there now. So will there be a way to look at that, or you can try to prepare one?
So we have the information that underwrites the economic evaluation that is in the report. Our economist is here, and he's been tasked to try to pull some of that together. It wouldn't be the traditional economic appendix that you're used to, but it would be the foundation of all the analysis that we've done. We're doing that right now because we're having the same request from the Secretary's office and from headquarters. And so as soon as we get that together, we'll share that with you.
I have one more question about your history slide. Would you mind dialing back to the history slide? The 2007 USACE preliminary draft report compared an older levee plan to the Two Lakes project. And the Corps of Engineers, after they compared it and looked at the relative costs, said, we're not going to build your lake, and we're not going to do any more studies. Thank you very much. And they said, if you want to go forward, Rankin-Hines Drainage District, you can get permission from Congress to do it. That's the story I know, and that's not what that says. But it was done with Corps oversight. So the Rankin-Hines Drainage District developed their PEIS. The Corps is watching over their shoulder, checking that they're following NEPA. And I wonder how we went from 2007 or 2008 when the Corps said, we're not going to do this, until now when we've got the Corps helping sell a plan to build a lake, the kind of thing that they said they weren't going to do. And how that happened. And, you know, there's an imbalance of power here. You know, we, small environmental groups, are like fleas on the back of you all and the Drainage District. We've been to Washington twice to the Pentagon, haven't gotten to meet with Mr. Connor, but we've met with Mr. Pinkham once, and then Mr. Leach once. They've been, how many times a month? I don't know. There's an imbalance of power here, and there's, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but there's a story from one of the early public meetings before 2015, I guess. And it was when the late John McGowan went to the meetings, and a couple who had a swamp tour talked to him after the meeting. He was a very charming man, and the swamp tour couple, they were very attractive, and they told him why the lower waterways were going to be a problem for them. And he let them say their piece, and then smiled and winked and leaned in and said, "You know I'm going to win. I'm rich." And I think that explains a lot about this process, about the imbalance of power. And I wish there wasn't a hurry to approve this thing, because as I said the other night, you can do it well, or you can do it by December. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, no questions. I'm just going to take a statement. So I said before that I'm just representing myself, my family. And I said we've been here since the 1800s, and I think it was in the 1850s. So a long time, over 150 years. We have stories in our family of the floodings and where it got to the house. In I think it was 1902 or 1906, that the flood got the highest point. In 2020, yes, we did have a flood. But I will say in 1976, that was not a natural flood. That was a man-made flood by the reservoir. They decided to let the water go as late as they did, which impacted all of us downstream. My husband and I just inherited the place with my brother, and we had the land surveyed, and I know I've lost 18 acres on the Pearl River and surrounding waterway. The banks to the river and the surrounding waterway are so high that in order to go swimming now, we have a rope, right? We go down by a huge rope in order to get to the bank. And the banks are keeping on eroding. The Army Corps of Engineers built a second bridge over our land and created a waterway so that we wouldn't have so much flooding. Well, guess what? The waterway has eroded so much that it's almost a second egress of the tributary. So I'm sorry, you're adding another lake, another water, more water that you don't have control of, that's going to come down. And yes, I know you said it wasn't going to impact the water levels, but during flooding times, the rich seem to get the answers that they want, and we suffer downstream, and now you're talking about more water coming. I don't like this plan. I don't think anybody in this room likes these plans. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir?
Carmen Lambert, I've been arrested Lawrencetown, Alabama. I worked on paper mill 44 years.
Could you get a little closer to the mic, sir, and give your name again, please? I'm sorry.
Carmen Lambert. We own some property down 587 right on the river. I can see the river from my front porch every morning. We had, that's been my wife's family for 4 generations, since the 1800s. Ever since they built the reservoir, I know in the early 80s, my father walked in one day and said, well, they took 300 acres off my tax road. It's gone to the river. It's on the other side of the river now. And the Broad River is the property line. So it's other man for right now. We inherited the place in 2004. We had 1,100 acres down there. Now we've got 775 acres down there. Talk about losing 50 acres, that ain't nothing. Lose 500 acres. That's a lot of land, and ain't nothing you can do about it. You know, like I said, and I haven't figured out yet how I know the lake's gonna help. All you're gonna do is fill the floodplain down up there. And when you fill the floodplain up, that water ain't got one place to go, here. It's gonna make our flooding worse when we have a very high river. I remember '79, we had 1,000 acres underwater. I've had 400 acres underwater 5 times this year. So, and I know about the river flooding. And all the banks, that river used to be lined with willow trees. There's no willow trees on that river anymore because they've all sloped in the river because they dropped them out so fast. I've seen that river drop 12 feet in less than 10 hours. And you can't say that's all natural. But they got to maintain, only thing that saved hurt us one year, they had raised the level in the reservoir 12 inches because they were going to have a bass tournament. We had a heavy rain. Guess who got all the extra water? We did. So, I mean, the other lake ain't going to help. Because, like I said, you fill a tub up, you ain't got nowhere but the water go downhill. And that's all it's going to do, make a bigger tub. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else? Okay. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming. Your voices have been heard. If you still feel like you would like some additional information, our subject matter experts, like I said, are downstairs. If you still want your comments, if you don't have the opportunity to either access a website, their email, and you can still send things via the postal service. So I would just thank you for your participation here. Please have a safe trip home. Thank you all.